This happened 2 years ago, on Halloween night of 2023. I was 22 back then, working as a community events coordinator. My day had already been exhausting. We'd just finished a huge Halloween festival with costume contests, candy trivia, and parents versus kids dodgeball games. By the time I got home that evening, all I wanted was a shower and a quiet night on the couch. But an hour later, my little sister Savannah called. She wanted me to take her and my 11-year-old nephew Jackson trick-or-treating. Our parents were tired, Jackson's folks were busy, and somehow the cool big brother job always fell on me. I wasn't in the mood, but I agreed anyway. Savannah was 15, dressed as Raven from Teen Titans, pale white makeup, dark hood, the works. Jackson was Sub-Zero from Mortal Kombat. Once they were ready, we drove to a nearby neighborhood known for its decorations and candy. It was busy. Kids running across lawns, parents chatting on sidewalks, the usual Halloween chaos. For the first hour, everything was normal. Friendly people, laughter, bags full of sweets, even an old man grilling hot dogs instead of giving candy. He said he preferred giving kids something with protein. It was actually kind of wholesome. By 9 p.m., things started slowing down. Most families were heading home, porch lights flickering off one by one. We'd reached the far end of the neighborhood and started walking back toward my car, which was parked about 10 minutes away. The air was colder now, the street quieter, only the crunch of leaves beneath our shoes. Across the street, in a yard with no lights on, someone was standing perfectly still, dressed in all black, hooded cloak, mask, not moving an inch. At first I thought it was just a decoration, maybe one of those life-sized props. But then its head tilted, slowly in our direction. I stopped walking for a second and whispered to Savannah, "Stay close to me. Look across the street, but don't stare." Jackson thought it was funny, said it was probably someone trying to scare trick-or-treaters. But Savannah wasn't laughing. She noticed the tension in my voice, and she knew I carried a gun. I never told Jackson about that, but Savannah had seen it before. We kept walking, trying not to make it obvious that we'd seen the person. But as we moved further, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. A few minutes later, I heard it. Heavy footsteps behind us. Not running. Just steady, deliberate steps on concrete. When I turned around, my heart dropped. The same figure was there, about 50 feet back, walking in our direction. Under the streetlight, I could see more detail. A tactical vest, boots, black pants tucked in. The mask covered their entire face, tight like spandex. That wasn't a costume. I whispered, "They're following us." Savannah froze for a moment, then kept walking. Jackson didn't fully get it, but he could tell something was wrong. We didn't run. We just walked faster, pretending not to notice. But every time I glanced back, the figure matched our pace. Not gaining, not losing distance, just watching. By the time we reached the car, my adrenaline was through the roof. I turned, and the person was still approaching, slow and steady, like they knew I wouldn't drive away without understanding what was happening. So I did something risky. I turned, pulled out my Glock, and aimed straight at them. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady when I said, "Stop right there. Why are you following us?" The figure froze. Then slowly, they raised both hands and pulled off their mask. It was a woman, maybe in her 30s, pale face, emotionless eyes. She stared back at me like she was bored. "I'm an undercover cop," she said, her tone robotic, almost rehearsed. "There was a break-in reported in this area. When you looked at me suspiciously, I thought you were the suspect. Lower your weapon before I arrest you." Something about her didn't make sense. An undercover cop wearing tactical gear, a cloak, watching families from the dark instead of the house that was supposedly broken into? I asked, "If you're a cop, where's your badge? Why the mask? Why were you just standing there?" She didn't answer. She just stared, and then smiled. That smile didn't look human. It was wide, slow, and filled with something malicious. Then she said in a calm but chilling voice, "If you didn't have that gun, This night would have ended a lot differently for you." The moment she said that, I noticed movement behind her. 4 figures stepped out from between 2 houses, all dressed the same way. Black tactical gear, masks, no expressions. "Get in the car," I whispered to Savannah and Jackson. They didn't ask questions, they just ran. I kept my gun raised, backing toward the car, never taking my eyes off the woman. She didn't move. She just stood there, smiling as the others slowly approached from behind her. As soon as the kids were inside, I jumped in, started the car, and floored it. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely keep the wheel straight. In the rearview mirror, the woman was still standing in the street, that same twisted grin on her face, watching us leave. The drive home was silent. No one said a word. Jackson clutched his candy bag like it was a shield. Savannah stared out the window, pale and shaking. When I dropped them off safely, I told my parents everything. Then I went home and sat in the dark for a long time trying to make sense of it. The next morning, I went back to that neighborhood, to the exact house where I'd first seen the woman. I knocked on the door, and a middle-aged man answered. He said there hadn't been any break-in, no police, no reports. He hadn't seen anything unusual. That's when I knew she'd lied. A few days later, I got a text from an unknown number. No words, just a photo. It was my car, parked outside my apartment. That image made my blood run cold. They knew where I lived. I went to the police, filed a report, and told them everything. They said without a direct threat or proof, there wasn't much they could do. So I installed a Ring camera, changed my locks, and kept my gun closer than ever. It's been 2 years since that night. Nothing else has happened. No messages, no sightings. But every Halloween, when I see someone standing alone in the dark, I can't help but wonder if she's still out there, watching some other family, waiting for someone less prepared. All I know is one thing. If I hadn't been armed that night, none of us would have made it home. Story 2. This happened when I was 12 years old, during a Halloween weekend trip my family took to a small mountain resort in northern Georgia. It wasn't anything fancy, just a few cabins, a hayride, and a bonfire the resort hosted every October. For a kid, it was paradise. The trees were glowing orange, the air smelled like wood smoke, and all I could think about was the candy and the haunted hayride they advertised on flyers. My parents had booked the trip as a family getaway. It was me, my mom, my dad, and my cousin Nate, who was around my age. We were inseparable. 2 kids armed with flashlights, walkie-talkies, and too much sugar. The resort was small, maybe 15 cabins in total. Each had a porch, a couple of rocking chairs, and a view of the dark forest that surrounded the whole place. Behind our cabin, a narrow trail led straight into the woods. A faded sign read, "Stay on the path." That first evening, we joined the resort's Halloween party. There were maybe 20 people, a mix of families, some older couples, a few teenagers. They had pumpkin carving, a costume contest, and later, a hayride that would take guests down a long dirt trail through the forest, where volunteers hid in costumes to jump out and scare people. It all started fun, until I saw him. We were lining up for the hayride when I noticed a man standing at the edge of the woods. He wasn't in costume, at least not a normal one. He wore a dark gray jacket and a black cap pulled low. His clothes looked old, like something out of a hunting catalog from the 80s. His hands were in his pockets and his head was slightly tilted down, but even from a distance I could tell he was staring right at us. At first, I assumed he was one of the workers or someone's dad, but something about him made my stomach twist. He didn't move, didn't talk, just stood there, watching the crowd of families laughing and waiting in line. When our turn came, I climbed onto the wagon with Nate and a few other kids. The tractor engine roared to life and we started moving into the woods. Everyone was chatting, laughing, and except me. I couldn't stop glancing back at the edge of the tree line. That's when I saw him again. As the wagon rolled forward, the man stepped deeper into the woods, keeping pace with us between the trees. His figure would appear between gaps in the trunks, then vanish, then appear again, always the same distance away. I didn't say anything to Nate at first because I didn't want to sound paranoid. But when the tractor made a turn and the headlights swept across the trees, we both saw him clearly, standing behind a tree, his head tilted out just enough for his face to catch the light. And he was smiling. It wasn't the kind of smile people give when they're happy. It was stretched, wrong, forced, like someone trying to mimic what a smile is supposed to look like. When the wagon stopped for one of the jump scare moments, Nate leaned close and whispered, "You see that guy too, right?" I nodded. The volunteer in costume jumped out. Everyone screamed and laughed, but I wasn't looking at the volunteer. I was looking deeper into the forest. The man was closer now, maybe 30 feet away, still smiling, still watching. The ride ended about 15 minutes later, and we all headed back toward the cabins. The adults were chatting and drinking cider near the bonfire, so Nate and I decided to hang around the edge of the woods with our flashlights, playing some made-up game. It didn't take long before the feeling came back, that someone was nearby. The forest was quiet, too quiet, except for the occasional crack of a twig. I shined my flashlight between the trees and my stomach dropped. The man was there again. Same clothes, same expression, standing dead still about 20 feet away. Nate whispered, "Dude, what if he's following us?" I didn't answer. My heart was hammering. The man slowly raised his arm and waved. Just a slow, stiff movement like he was mocking us. That's when we ran. We sprinted back toward the bonfire, yelling for my parents. When I turned back, the man was gone. My dad walked with us to check the woods, thinking maybe it was one of the resort's actors playing a prank. But when we got there, the ground was empty. No footprints, no flashlight beam, nothing, just darkness. Later that night, I woke up to the sound of something tapping on the cabin window. 3 soft taps. Then silence. I sat up, heart pounding, and looked toward the window. Nothing but darkness outside. I told myself it was a branch or maybe a raccoon. I almost believed that until I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. This time I saw it. A shadow moved across the glass. Someone was standing right outside. I froze. Slowly the shape leaned forward until the faint outline of a face pressed against the window. That same pale grin. The man from the woods. I wanted to scream but couldn't. My voice just wouldn't come out. I scrambled out of bed, ran to my parents' room, and woke them up yelling that someone was outside. My dad grabbed his flashlight and rushed to the door, but by the time he got there, whoever it was had disappeared. The next morning, we packed up and left early. My dad told the resort staff about it, but they didn't seem surprised. One of the workers quietly said that a few other guests had mentioned seeing a weird man wandering near the cabins late at night. They said local police had checked before, but never found anyone. To this day, I don't know who that man was, or what he wanted. I only know that his face, that empty grin, is burned into my memory. And sometimes, when I'm driving through wooded roads at night, I'll catch a glimpse of something in the trees, standing just far enough away to make me doubt what I saw. But deep down, I know. Some things don't follow you home. They just wait for you to come back. Story 3, Halloween night 2022. It was cold and quiet, one of those nights where the air feels still, and even the wind seems to be holding its breath. I live alone in a small 2-story house in Ohio. My neighborhood's usually busy, but that year, Halloween felt dead. Hardly any kids, just a few porch lights on, and the occasional echo of laughter down the street. I'd stayed home from work that night, planning to hand out candy and maybe watch a scary movie afterward. By 9 p.m., no one had come for almost an hour, so I turned off the porch light and decided to call it a night. I made some popcorn, put on The Conjuring, and curled up on the couch. About 15 minutes into the movie, I heard a knock at the door. 3 slow knocks. At first I smiled, figured it was some late trick-or-treaters. I grabbed the candy bowl, opened the door, but there was no one there. Just the sound of wind moving through dry leaves on the porch. I shrugged it off, closed the door, and went back to the couch. A few minutes later, knock, 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 same rhythm, same slow, deliberate pattern. I paused the movie. My stomach tightened. I didn't move right away. I just sat there staring at the door, waiting for another sound. Then came the faint creak of the porch boards, like someone was walking back and forth. This time I grabbed the flashlight I keep on the counter and walked to the window beside the door. The porch was empty again, but then I noticed something that made my heart race. The bowl of candy I'd left outside earlier was gone, completely gone. I muttered to myself, "Damn kids," and locked the door, just to be safe. But deep down, I knew something about it didn't feel like a prank. I went back to the living room, trying to focus on the movie again. But before I could even sit down, there was another sound. Not from the front this time. From the back of the house, the unmistakable metallic clink of a doorknob turning. Every instinct in me went cold. I turned off the TV, plunging the room into silence, and listened. The sound came again. Slow, steady pressure on the back door handle, like someone was testing it. I grabbed my phone, switched on the flashlight, and tiptoed toward the kitchen where the back door was. The light from my phone reflected faintly off the glass, and that's when I saw it. A shadow. Someone was standing just outside. At first, all I could make out was the shape of a head and shoulders. Then, as my eyes adjusted, I saw a face behind the glass. A mask. A white, featureless mask. My pulse spiked. I yelled, "Who the hell are you? Get off my property!" The figure didn't move, didn't speak, just tilted its head, slowly, like it was studying me. Then, with sudden force, it slammed a fist against the glass. The sound made me jump back. The figure vanished into the dark yard, footsteps fading toward the side of the house. I ran upstairs, locked myself in the bedroom, and called 911. As I was on the phone with dispatch, I heard it again, this time from the basement. Glass breaking. The operator told me to stay on the line and lock the door. I could hear my own breathing getting faster as I grabbed the gun from my nightstand. Then, faintly through the floorboards, I heard the creak of footsteps below. Someone was inside. The dispatcher said police were on the way, but every second felt like an hour. I could hear the steps getting louder, creaking up the stairs. My door handle jiggled. I pointed the gun toward it and yelled, "The police are coming! Don't move!" Silence. Then the sound of retreating footsteps. I waited, tense, shaking, until I heard the sirens outside. Red and blue lights flickered through my window. I opened my door and shouted for help. 2 officers came rushing in, guns drawn. They searched the house from top to bottom. In the basement window, they found a shattered pane, the point of entry, and right beneath it, a crowbar, still smeared with dirt. But the man was gone. When they checked outside, they found footprints leading to the woods behind my house. The trail stopped about 20 feet in, where tire tracks picked up, like a car had been waiting. The police told me they'd look into it, but that it might have been a random burglary attempt. But it didn't feel random. The next morning, one of the officers returned. He told me they caught someone matching my description, a man wearing black clothes and a white mask, just 3 miles away. When they searched his car, they found something that made my stomach twist. Inside the trunk was a duffel bag. Inside the bag, duct tape, zip ties, gloves, and a loaded handgun. He wasn't trying to rob me. He was planning something much worse. That night, I realized how lucky I'd been. If I hadn't locked the door early, or if I'd ignored the noises for another minute, that man could have been inside my room before I even knew it. Now, every Halloween, I keep my porch light off. No decorations, no candy, no noise. I don't care if people call me paranoid. I just don't want anyone knocking at my door again. Because sometimes the monster outside isn't wearing a costume. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss another dark tale. This is Mr. DARKHOUR, and I'll see you in the next story.